The obelisk. The obelisk is the key.
Good evening and welcome back to the Obelisk. Tonight we have special guest, a returning guest, Nathan, and a new guest, Gary Taters, who are both people I met in the Cruising with Steak group. So they've been doing, Nathan does work with Stolen History and does some writing there and a lot of research and that kind of thing. And Gary's been doing similar work and has a bunch of information about the Basques, right? So we're going to talk about tonight.
Yes, sir.
So we're going to present that. Welcome to the show, guys. If you want to, Gary, if you want to like talk about,
man,
introduce yourself, since I have no idea. You're just this guy I know.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm out in Idaho. I am I'm half Basque blooded American. So my mom was 100% Basque. Her parents spoke Basque. She spoke some Basque. And yeah, I'm just out here in Idaho, living the life. And the Basques have an amazing and just really mind-boggling history that no one is talking about. And I think it's going to be a really fun conversation. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Nathan, we've gotten 2 earloads of you already. You've been on the show twice before.
I do all right. Thanks.
Yeah, they're some of our highest viewed videos. So,
well, welcome, gentlemen. It's a pleasure.
Yes.
It's definitely a pleasure to have you back, Nathan, and it's a pleasure to have you on for the first time, Gary.
Thank you.
Yeah. And welcome everyone in the live chat, you 20 beautiful people. And yeah, so where should we get started?
I can give I just kind of thought I'd give kind of a Basques for Dummies kind of intro 101. Some people,
Perfect.
I tell them I'm Basque and they're like the fish, so there's probably a few people out there that have no idea what Basque even is. And Basque is the indigenous people of the Iberian Peninsula in Europe between Spain and France. And they are Aboriginal or indigenous, so they're the OGs of Europe, one of them, of that area. And basically southern France and northern Spain, the Pyrenees, from coastline to coastline, that region is known as, right now, I guess, the Basque Autonomous Region. They've never had their own country per se, like boundaries, borders, but the culture and the people have been there from time immemorial. And the language is super fascinating, and the genetics are super fascinating of Basques. It's called a language isolate, so it has no relation to any other language. It's almost impossible to learn off of a paper or off a screen. The words are really intimidating looking, and the phonetics are super weird. So it's one of those languages, I think less than 1 million people speak it. I could be wrong on that. Check me on all my stuff. This stuff is so hard to find, this information. A lot of this comes from my family.
What's the root language of Basque?
There is no root language. It is a language isolate. It has no root language.
Nice.
So it predates. Yeah, go ahead, Armor.
There are only a couple other instances of contemporary languages, which are, to use alliteration, these contemporary languages today are not contemporaneous to even each other. The Magyar in Hungary also have a language isolate that is just as puzzling. But the Basques actually, Yaskaran might be older.
Well, there was a discovery in 2020 of a bronze hand, and I think they dated it, BCE. I know BCE. I don't know how many hundreds of years, and it was carved. Euskara was carved in it, in bronze. So the script was carved, and I mean, we're talking, if they're carving it in bronze in BCE, it's already been around for a long time. So that discovery officially dated Euskara as the oldest known language, like written down language in Europe anyway. So yeah.
Do you speak it?
I speak a bastard, like enough to me and my kids can point and laugh at stuff in public and no one knows what we're talking about. And, you know, I know all the cuss words and how to count and sing happy birthday and a few things. You know, we call all our relatives by their Basque names and a few things. All my aunts and uncles here, most of them are all 100% Basque still. My mom was the black sheep that married non-Basque blood. And so I came out kind of half, but my cousins are full-blooded, still my age, which, I mean, in America, there's only a handful of full-blooded Basque people in America. Even in the Basque country, there's not a lot. But the
Are you
Basques,
Rh negative?
I am. I'm Rh
Stole
negative.
my
I have
question.
green eyes.
So do
I've got
I.
all sorts of weird genetics. I have no wisdom teeth on top. My dentist is like, you have the weirdest fucking mouth. Excuse me, can we cuss?
Yes.
The
Yes.
weirdest mouth I've ever seen. He's like calling random people in. My cousin, the same thing. My cousin's blind. He has a rare eye disease, retinitis pigmentosa. And basically he's so fucking inbred that his parents both had a recessive gene that just never happens. And it happened with him. So
Wow.
about when he was 18, his periphery started closing in on him. And now he's like 40 and pretty well fully blind.
So is the Rh negative exclusive to the Basque people? Did it spread out from the Basque or?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So
I mean, there's definitely something to those old world bloodlines, and Rh negative has a very, you know, you hear about the Basques. If you hear Rh negative, the Basques are linked to it. So I'm not
Yes.
positive on that answer, but I think probably yes.
And well, and then there's all the tail. Like I have the green eyes. I'm Rh negative, and all that. And I have a genealogically a lot of lots and lots of French, but I didn't have, like, I didn't associate that with my modern day who I am.
Right.
So it was always interesting to me. Does it show up in, say, a DNA test, like a genetic test?
Yeah, like my mom never took one and she's passed, but my aunt took one recently and it came back one line. It was 99% Spain is what it said, because Basque isn't officially recognized. So they just said Spain.
Oh, okay.
But like her 23andMe was one line.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So
and now China owns her DNA.
Yeah, exactly.
There's specific reason why I've been so excited for this. The correlates between my first and second guest spot here are perfectly exemplified by Gary and his information. We spoke about what in the first episode that I did, how people call the Ashkenazim the enemy. And I think that it's a fool's errand to go chasing after the minion when you could be looking for the boss. And the Basque people have specific ties to the Sephardim. And this is pre-1400s, and we all know about the Sephardim.
So for the people that don't, will you fill them in?
There's different kinds of Jewish people, just like today. Sometimes when the Jews are linked to a specific place where they convert away from Judaism or maintain their Judaism, they gain a separate name. While Jew is the umbrella term, you have the Mestizo, the Mirano, the Sephardim, the Ashkenazi, and 23 other names. And so the specific subset of these people are the Sephardim. They come from Basque country. A lot of them did stay there, yes, and that is a contentious issue we'll get into later. But these are the specific Jews that went on to start the Dutch East Indies Company. And so
is there
their history.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that. I knew that. When you say Sephardim, is that what people refer to as the Sephardic?
Yes, the Sephardim is like calling them the Jedi.
Oh, okay.
So complex grammar, but you could say the Sephardic Jews or the Sephardi with two I's. It's dealer's choice, really.
And so what's the difference between them and, say, the Ashkenazi? Did I say Ashkenazi?
So
That's how it's spelled.
I know, but the way it comes out.
If you are Ashkenazi, then you might be of the Ashkenazim. So Im refers to group as a whole, but those are mainly Europe, Eastern Europe, and specifically, and this is separate from something like Khazarian, and separate from those in the Iberian Peninsula. And so Gary's got this specific thing, and the Basque also relating to different bloodlines that we spoke of in the second episode, I believe. But yeah, Gary.
Yeah, a
continue.
lot of people don't know Ignatius Loyola was a Basque. So he was born of a relatively, powerful family, and was injured in war. He was a very pompous dude, was known as kind of a flamer, and would use his power to get away with, tomfoolery that he shouldn't be getting away with. But he was from the Basque region and from Basque families, and essentially he went to the Basque villages, because the Basques, I mean, we can go as hard as you guys want, but their history, they're master negotiators. No one conquered that. I mean, to this day, it's the Basque Autonomous Region, and you've never heard of it. So they're doing something right? And they don't pay taxes to Spain. They don't pay taxes to France. So they can't be conquered easily. And so he took these people who were master negotiators and took the cream of each village crop, and he put one in, the Far East. He put them all over the world, and they established the Jesuit church. And so the Jesuit church opened up. I mean, I'm sure you guys know more about it than I do, but a lot of people don't know that connection between Loyola and the Basques and the Jesuit church. And the Basques had made it to the new land, I mean, with the Celts before. I mean, I don't know. Right there's a whaling station. What's it called in Newfoundland? I forget what it's called, but UNESCO came in and screwed with the dating, but they had it back to like 1300, and now UNESCO, 1500, right after Columbus, of course. But up until recently, they had Basques in the New World officially at 1300. I mean, stories my family talks about, the Basques were in the New World from the beginning, from the jump. I think the Basques come from Atlantis, because they were the shipbuilders. They built Columbus's ships. They got Columbus to the New World. Like they're the backbone of colonization of the world, and no one's ever heard of them.
Yeah, I told Nish this afternoon. I'm like, that's my I'm front loaded there. I can't get rid of that.
Yeah. It's pretty wild, and it just goes to show. And we can get into it too, more about like the bombing of Guernica right before World War II. Franco basically outlawed Basque. If you were Basque, you were shot. They took all the Euskera script off of all the gravestones, all the buildings. I mean, there's something there. Hitler was looking for treasure in the Basque country. There's knowledge or relics or power or something sacred about the people in the region there that to this day is being occluded from us. And I really want someone to hear this and be better researcher than me and find out why.
Is there a connection between the French Huguenots and the Basque?
Or the Paysaurs?
The story sounds the same. I mean, they literally were almost wiped out.
Yeah.
Also the Estonians. Now, he hits on a really special topic when he talks about the Atlantis thing, and a lot of people consider satellite cities of Atlantis being a reason for the homogeneity of some artifacts found in antiquity. There's a severe Basque, Scottish Pict, and Algonquin connection, not only from their phenotype, which has more similarities to Basques than any other phenotype, but their language, their use of tattoos, their use of feathered plumage and piercings, everything. Modern Gaelic actually preserves many spelled letters that are no longer pronounced, but when pronounced in Gaulish or ancestral Celts, they're similar to Algonquin. And the Basque words are much the same. So when you talk about surviving cultures and pockets of civilization, we do have some specific evidence to link the Basque to other standouts.
See, this is what, as I understand my own genealogy, the because I have a huge amount of Scottish in me, and then we have the four parents, right, and then it just spreads out from there. But and then when I learned about the French Huguenots and all the French, that moved, well, they were being persecuted into Switzerland and into Scotland and then over into America and other places. I'm just curious about how these lines work, and how the crossover happens. And I'm also really curious a lot of times when you have at this day and age people that don't have much diversity in their blood because of how much mixing if you're in America, how much mixing has gone on, especially here with the different flavors of people. Like my grandfather was Sicilian, Norman Sicilian, and then there's all this Scottish and Norwegian and a huge amount of French, and it's interesting to me. And the one thing I started to piece together was blood types seem to be a certain marker amongst some of these peoples, and the Basque seem to be the ones that really come to mind when I think of Rh negative. It's always where my head goes. And so that's where I was trying to make this connection between the Huguenots and the Basque.
Yeah, and it's the old world blood, right? It's that Rh negative, which is old blood. And the Basque, the reason they're connected to it is because they can directly link Basque DNA to, I want to say Neanderthal or before. I mean, they found a cave. There's a cave in Spain in the Basque region. I think it's called like the Santa Mamine cave, and there's cave art in there from the indigenous Basque, and it has bison, woolly mammoth, woolly rhinoceroses, bears, and lions, and it has humans alongside like these animals that are extinct and are not even in that region of the world, but were at a long time ago. So it's those old, really, really old bloodlines that really carry something that is a mystery for sure.
And the propagation of Rh negative blood is far less uncommon than people believe. When you really look at Rh negative blood, which is two types, I am AB negative, which makes me the second type of Rh negative. And this is about 30% of the world population.
AB negative?
No, all of Rh negative blood types are.
I thought it was only 15%.
Mm-hmm. A common misconception, but when you look at it, and even by race, these aren't as rare as people think. What's rare is to find it in the first world in a case in which you would need to take someone's blood.
Right, and they don't do blood tests. You have to really, I mean, you could do your own, but even if you go see a GP, they won't type your blood.
Yeah,
it's weird.
It's only something that they would do if they need a transfusion or something about you is so special that they have to look. So of all the people that they've looked at, the numbers don't lie. It's way more than we think. And it's also almost completely equally spread amongst the races.
That's interesting. Right.
So there's Rh negative Mongoloids?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, some of the only links between Basques are like over in that region, the Ural Mountains. And what I was trying to think of before was Homo heidelbergensis, who is like the parent to Neanderthals. And that's the oldest human fossil that we found. And that was found in the Basque country in a cave. And we can go into their mythology, but it has us all coming from caves. And before Christianity came, pre-Christianity, the Basques were animists who, kind of worshiped the mountains and the trees, much like the Celts, and believed that the gods were in the earth. They also worshiped the sun, but it was a much more animist perspective. Sorry, I kind of took us on a tangent there.
I'm going to take us right back though for just a second, because so amongst the Basque, is there a specific type of Rh negative that's more that expresses more like the like AB negative or I don't know, O negative, one of the others, or is it just a mix up?
So when it comes to the blood, the physical and symptomatic expressions often happen in early development. And there's nothing to say that because you have these expressions, this is your blood type. It's not so heavily correlated as that. I have an astigmatism. I have blue eyes, red in my beard, gray in my hair since I was 14. I always thought it was weird. I learned what my blood type was. It made sense. Those are a lot of the markers. The rest of the markers that they will talk about are wooey.
One thing I wanted to bring up when you were talking about.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Yeah. When Nathan, you were talking about adopting a name for the region in which the group was existing, right? Cliff High talks about that, and that they were. I know it's Cliff High. I know.
It's okay.
Some of the stuff he says is interesting, and that's all I'm saying is this. I hear a correlation. She lost sound. Oh, sorry, Nish. One of the things he brought up was that areas of the world way back when, you know, were always wary of and excuse me, and warned against the group of people they called the name stealers, which kind of ties into that adopting the name of the area in which you're in.
You know, the Romans gave the Basques that name. They were called Vascones, and then the Romans are the ones who coined the term Basque. So they gave them a name, the name that we have today. So that kind of goes along with what you're saying. Sorry, Armoro.
For a little tidbit, you can look at the etymology and origin of the name Vasquez.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
And one more thing I wanted to drop. You were talking about, you know, Sephardim and how the I am means a group. The most famous one people probably recognize is Elohim. It's it's by syntax alone, it's a group. It's not a one thing. So anyway,
exactly, like to denote male versus female in the early languages, it's ein versus ein.
Right.
So there was that big thing in the 1800s where they said ein Elohim. Should it not be ein Elohim? And yeah. Language is funny and should not be discounted, but you can tell a lot of lies with a language. In the 1800s, there was a specific type of name stealing going on in which the Ashkenazim actually stole most German things, including their names. Goldstein, you mean the German word for stone? And now there are no more Germans with the last name Stone? Because now it's a Jewish name. There's a lot of examples about that, especially when German changed from Old German to what it is today.
That's interesting.
All right, Gary, also, we totally derailed your intro.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm just, yeah, it's wonderful. But I don't know, where was I here?
In the petroglyph area.
I think you
oh yeah,
you were talking
about. Well, I mean, it just raises some points. Like they're finding cave art of humans with creatures that weren't supposed to be with humans, you know, and humans drawing pictures of that on a wall. It's super fascinating to me. Like there's definitely a super mysterious component there that we're missing a big piece of this puzzle, and I think it's intentionally done. And I think maybe that's what the Nazis were looking for, and the Templars were looking. Everyone who comes through that region is looking for this missing piece, I think, that links us to our history. I think that might be the secret the Basques hold. Their DNA goes all the way back to Homo heidelbergensis. I mean, their cave art, the oldest fossil is in their region. There's something there, and no one's ever heard of it. So there's someone out there that knows more and can go take this further than me, probably you guys, but I just find it so fascinating.
It is. Whenever I hear Basques, I always think that for some reason I think that their territory starts with where the mountains start, right? Is that correct?
No, it actually goes. It's their region has mountains to desert, so it goes basically to the edge of the desert. So yeah, more or less, it's the mountain is the Pyrenees is what you
the
could
Pyrenees.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from coast to coast, and the big port Gipuzkoa, which is now Bilbao, was a Basque port, and it became huge because, again, the Basques, you could come into that port and you didn't have to mess with the Spanish government or the French government. And so the Basque cities started pulling in people from Spain and France to that region, and it became really wealthy. And I just totally lost my train of thought.
So is that Bilbao? That's in Portugal now, right?
No, it's in Spain now.
It's in Spain. Okay.
Yeah.
So
They do have links to Portugal. I traced my bloodline, but back super far, and it went back. Some of my lineage was Knights of the Orders of St. James, which is they were big in Portugal. They were Templar style knights that protected religious pilgrimages from here to there. That's the cover story anyway. I mean, what they were really protecting and moving, I don't know, but there's definitely some ties with Portugal.
I learned about Bilbao playing a train game, like an old Mayfair Games train game. Do you guys remember those? You have to buy track, like a link at a time, and you draw lines across and you deliver. You pick up loads in one city and you build a line to another one and deliver it and get money to expand your railroad. Like there's British rails and there's one for America and there's one for Europe. I think it was called Euro Rails. And Bilbao was was like the most you'd ever make on a load would be taken into Bilbao. It was like so far from everything else. But no, that was a really shitty anecdote. I'm sorry. Anyway.
No, it's all good. And the Basques, they brought tobacco over from the New World. Mm-hmm. So they introduced Europe to the tobacco plant. They introduced Europe to the rubber plant. They invented the first sport, jai-alai, which is like a rubber ball and you basket on your hand and you throw it against the wall. And then the French took the rubber and made tennis. So, a lot of the absolute origins of culture of the world, I mean, we owe to these people who could navigate the Atlantic well before any certified timeline will tell you that they were doing it. There was multiple people doing it, but the Basques and the Celts were the ones doing it mainly.
Do you think so getting back to this Atlantis thing as some kind of seed culture, do you think that, like, I kind of have this notion that they guided or built the pyramids that show up everywhere around the world and some of these advanced structures and became the Egyptians as well? That would be interesting. I don't know.
No, I think there's definitely something to that. Whether it was seeded or what, but I think like the Basques and the Celts were the knowledge that they had, you could say, coming out of the flood was so far ahead of everyone else that there has to be a link to before the flood. So I think they were definitely maybe seated in the caves. That's why Basque mythology has them coming out of the caves. I think maybe they do where to put people to survive, and they let, even if the smartest person today was wiped out with all the knowledge, you got to have the resources. So it took them a while, but eventually, that knowledge was there. So I definitely think it links back to a pre-flood civilization.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Which time?
I know, right? And did they take them from Atlantis and intentionally put people in caves, in different regions, or did that happen organically? Were they just there?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a question I struggle with all that. Is like, if there were pre-civilizations, previous ones, how did they revert so quickly? How long, did it take from collapse to through Mad Max world to getting to living in caves and not being able to speak? You have to draw a line. That's just kind of a de-evolution I don't understand.
One generation. One generation.
Nah, I don't think so.
There are things. There are humans. There was a special. It was I think it was called Wolf Children. Anyways, these children grew up in the wild,
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
they were rescued, and they had been only around animals, and the speech centers of their brain had never developed, and never at any point in their lives after they were recovered and brought into civilization did those parts of the brain come alive. They never learned to speak. They could never speak. Degeneracy? Not necessarily. Imagine someone is born and spoken to telepathically all of their lives. They develop it, they become a telepath. That's cool, but none of us can do it, and we're too old to start. I think that it happens in this manner. Um, People isolated and traumatized and dissociated out of something die, but their children survive and never learn the skills. I think it can happen very fast.
I I don't know what that background is. Ish. I hear it too. Is that someone behind you, Armoro? No.
There's like a radio or something going,
Yeah.
or
It doesn't matter. It's not that distracting. Oh shit! I forgot what I was going to say now.
I was talking about one generation to
Yeah.
rule us all.
What I was going to say was I wasn't saying it can't happen. I don't think it's a quick process. It would take a long
I think
time.
I don't know. I think I'm siding with Nathan on this. I think that it can be a very quick process, and there's context to that. It depends on the severity of whatever event happens, and how fast that can happen. And then you've got a generation that comes up into the new, and there's no context for anything else. There's no elders. There's, I mean, if we're even going down this line of query, I mean, there's a lot of questions just in modern times about the orphanages of the last century, and the train babies, the cabbage babies, and all that. But there's a lot there that sparks the imagination as to what can happen. And if we're looking at just modern generations right now, the shift between the millennials and the Zeds is and there's been no breakdown at this point, is quite different, just from the technological standpoint, where the new generation that's coming in has no context to the world that we all knew, like none, and can't even imagine what that's like. So if you wipe out all the elders, then you have a generational shift. Of course, this social engineering actually plots this out through different organizations. The obvious is Tavistock, but so if we're talking something cataclysmic, I can see it going one generation, as Nathan's saying. I mean, it makes sense to me.
I think of a generation as 20 years. Is that the time frame you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, roughly.
That's agreeable. Now, with the Basque themselves, their origin is as shrouded as a bunch of other outstanding civilizations we can see, but their recent future is just as unexplained, or their recent past is just as unexplained. We have Gary and I were talking about this at length. The bombing of Guernica, and how the Basque peoples may have actually been caught up in the red wave pre-World War II. And we were trying to piece out who did what infiltration where and what was the goal, because the Basques were largely untouched even through that war.
Except for Guernica, which was, just pre-Hitler, the Nazi war machine, the first air raid to ever happen on this realm, whatever you want to call it, hit a tiny Basque village that was only known for having the tree of which under the first, laws to protect women, the first laws, equality, these type of things. Like the Basque culture is what they attacked, and why. I don't understand why the bombing of Guernica ever happened, other than they're trying to erase from the face of this earth a culture that has some sort of knowledge or some kind of something that they don't want around going into where we're at now. So we're about to lose something and a people that have been on this planet from time immemorial, that right at the precipice of losing something, a culture that we'll never get back.
That narrative reminds me a lot of the Yazidi. In Yemen. Are they in Yemen? They're over there. They're over in the
Middle
UAE.
East, yeah.
Yeah.
There were some in Afghanistan up in the hills and all that.
They're very persecuted and being genocided in a similar way. Attacked for no reason other than religious. I suppose it's a religious reason. They basically worship demons as their religion.
That's what they did to the Huguenots, too.
Yeah.
I mean, they try to wipe these people out.
See, do you think religion intentionally, or do you think it's a hostile force? I think the Basques who converted to Christianity did it by choice. I think it can be both, I guess.
It can be both, yeah. I don't know what the percent is, though. Because, when you've got... someone brought up in chat that Basque witches were burned at the stake by the Inquisition.
Absolutely.
And, facing being burned alive or converting to Christianity, me being who I am, I think I'd convert.
That Basque region was made an example of with witch trials and stuff because they were animist before. And the original Basques claim that they never, it's called like the Gentilac, and that they receded in deeper into the Pyrenees and never converted and kept to their original ways. But we don't hear from them anymore.
I bet. And the Yazidi are also animists. So
interesting.
And
I have to look into that connection.
I've been very sad about that Yazidi.
Yeah, me too. What, Nathan?
Well,
did the Celts practice animism?
Of course.
So, interesting tie-in, although I want to...
So did the Algonquin, by the way.
Yeah. But with the bombing of Guernica, I tend to look at it as a political maneuver, because at this point, the Basque peoples had already remained largely untouched. And I think that if it wasn't a local 9/11 to get them up in arms, I think it was a shot across the bow to their religious and elite sponsors.
And you look at what spawned from that after you have the rise of the ETA, like the Basque separatists party that starts from then on trying to hash out a Basque border and Basque country, and they want autonomy. And half the Basques are like, hey, we got what we want already. We don't need autonomy. And that Guernica started a schism between separatist Basques and, kind of original conservative Basques. And I think, if that was not the goal, it was certainly one of the outcomes. And then so you bring that to modern day forward, when my mother tries to travel abroad because of her name, Paquita Aldecoa, she's pulled in, strip searched in front of my dad everywhere they go because she's ETA. They think she's ETA. They blew up a train station in Madrid, allegedly. So they linked. Now, a lot of times you search Basque, that's what you get, ETA. You get terrorism.
Of course.
Jesus.
It's inversion.
So Nathan, you dropped that tidbit there. Elite sponsors.
Every faction has an elite sponsor, or they are fair game. I promise you this.
So, were you alluding to another group or just an elite portion of that same group? Or
So
off-world entities? What?
the Jesuits.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I could say the Jesuits. I'm not claiming to know anything.
Sure.
But
A faction
back,
within the Jesuits, not the entire order, of course.
it could simply be that somebody wanted the Jesuits to pay more attention, or perhaps the De Loyola faction um, to pay more attention. So what do? They get them looking. Oh, you're not taking the communist red wave seriously? What if it touched one of your sacred cities? And so this is honestly, if we're gonna go rational wiki 100%, that's probably what I'd go with. That was the reason, because iconoclasm is rife. If you don't think that by the 1700s everything of note had been copied and stored away so you could destroy the original, you should look harder at the UNESCO sites. But I think that was it.
Just so I understand what you're saying, is that the Jesuits were acting like a parent teaching a child a lesson, in a way?
No,
Okay.
No, they were being taught a lesson.
Oh, the
So-
Jesuits were being taught a lesson.
So
But,
let's say
that wasn't my question, though.
oh, what do you mean?
Who is the elite sponsor of the Basque people?
The
I think
Jesuits.
I think
Okay.
possibly
Okay.
the Jesuits or black nobility.
I got it. And so you're saying the bombing was then that warning?
A shot at them, yes.
Okay. By whom? By Germany?
Yeah, it was Italy, Mussolini, and it was pre-Hitler, but right before Hitler. So it was Italian and German armada, and it was green lighted by Franco, who was from the dictator in France.
Still dead, by the way.
And there's a
Is
massive
there a-
argument about whether or not Loyola was a crypto Jew. And this is such a big argument that it derails any talk about the Basque culture itself. So whether or not it was the bombing of a secretive Jewish faction or a holdout, or if it was done by them against an actual Basque faction, that's still up for debate.
Is there a Bolshevik connection here, a Russian connection here?
Yeah, big one.
Absolutely.
Gary, you know.
No,
me.
take it, Armor.
I've already talked so much. Come on.
You're more articulate than I am.
Yeah, but I forgot this part. We talked about the Bolshevik angle, and it's at the time what was happening in the world. Mussolini and his folk were dealing with the Red Wave. Spain was about to tear itself in two. Their own civil war was propagated by Bolshevism. And they had attempted from east to west to storm the European countries with this new idealism. And the Basque peoples had remained completely untouched. Now, this I thought originally was the point of such a false flag bombing. Out of nowhere, you bomb a people. Half of them now want to support Spain in this civil war, the rebel side, and the other half don't. And this event singularly almost dragged the Basque nation into World War II later on, but it almost dragged them into communism.
So yeah, that Bolshevik kind of ideology was definitely seeded throughout that region in that time period. You have a section of Basques. The French Basques are very much liberal, very much more lean towards that side. So I think that came down from up. But absolutely, the Bolsheviks came in and tried to seed that ideology kind of right before World War II popped off, and kind of probably trying to kind of skew the board in their favor in a way. So
and it's really strange looking at their leadership and the way the Basque went afterward, because and this is where I think they may have some sponsorship by an elite faction, because they didn't go the way of Hitler and Mussolini, who were two of the only three to actually stop communism from tearing their country apart.
I think the Basques were naturally communal too. Like they lived such a way as to where the whole village looked out for everyone, and we still do to this day. I mean, it's deep in their blood to help each other and live communally, big families together. So I think they were ripe for that ideology to take hold and for people to grab onto it because it was already kind of how they thought. And when that came in, it really fractured the Basque population, and to this day, it's never been the same. They're slowly, death by 1,000 paper cuts, removing this culture and this ideology. We could talk a little bit, I mean, about anything.
I was going to bring up, it's interesting now that we have a Jesuit as a pope.
First ever, right?
First ever. Well, first that we know of.
First open.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question for Gary on this. So where you are, stop. Where you are in would you say Idaho?
Yeah.
And that because there's a bunch of Basques
Yeah,
there, right?
in
It's like a
Boise.
whole
Yeah, there's a whole block downtown that's devoted to the Basques and Basque restaurants. We're members at the Basque Center. My daughter does original Basque dancing, and so once a month we go down every Sunday. But yeah, and they're fiercely Catholic. I grew up Catholic. Everyone here in my family's Catholic. But yeah, Basques.
Ave Maria.
Yeah. Oh man.
I'm a Roman Catholic, so there you go.
Nevada, Northern California, basically, like when the Basques came over, they were sent where no one else wanted to go. They were sent to Idaho, Northern Nevada, the barren parts of Central and Northern California. My great grandfather came over twice, and the second time he jumped off the boat before it got to Ellis Island because he knew what a shit show Ellis Island was, and he didn't want to go through it again. They tried to Americanize you. I even have the census here from the 1950s, and they Americanized all my family's names. My father was Jose Luis, or my grandfather, my chicha was Jose Luis, and they called him Joe. My mom was Paquita. They put her down as Patty. Miren was Mary. So
it's so terrible.
All along the line, they're stripping you of this culture.
So, well, they did that with the Gaelic names too. So where you are now and with your community there that's thriving and still coherent and together, what is the community in general thinking about this modern craziness that's going on here, especially in the Western world, but to hone it in further in the United States with this, what's looking very total control, kind of iron fisty situation, and also the clown world that we're seeing. Is there chatter? Are you able to talk about this? I mean, are y'all staying tight with this?
I can speak to what I know. My relatives, and I'm close with my aunts and uncles, and most of them initially bought the narrative, but by now have come complete 180. So I'd say there's a common theme among my family of, yeah, absolutely. Like, we're doubling down on family occasions. We're really leaning into the opposite of clown world. And I think it wasn't like a cohesive, hey, let's all do this, but the conditions of the time forced everyone to kind of see it that our way, kind of, I guess. But there are a lot of Basques here who are total full-on liberals. I know a couple Basque speakers. There's a big podcast I was thinking about doing, but they're dead set on a Basque speaker, and I just couldn't find one that was. I know a few that was willing to come on a show that wasn't fully mainstream. So it's split, but the ones that I'm close to, my family that I know, they're all really conservative. So we can leave it at that. But I do know some other ones who aren't. So, but the politics don't matter so much as getting together and making arasopa and having a calimocho, and just like it transcends what's happening now, I think. And there's a innate feeling to keep it alive in all of us, if that makes sense.
Is there some sort of idea, I guess, prophecy, or is this lining up with some mythos, maybe this period of time? So, the Catholics have the Bible, and Revelation is, looking very tangible at this point.
I would tend to agree, and I'm right there with you. I think the older generation that I'm trying to soak knowledge in, they're such boomers that it's hard for them to think out of the box enough they just think, oh, it's just, they're too caught up in the minutia of the news to see the bigger picture like maybe we might. But I think personally, absolutely, I'm right there with you. I think we're being forced into revelation.
Yeah.
Manufactured revelation.
It's a playbook, not a prophecy.
It's a playbill. Yeah. I agree with that. I think it is being manufactured.
It's a divine event 201.
Well, they have all the tools to do it, and that's the thing.
God, it was a funny joke.
And you have to take out these people that are bloodlines and cultures that still to this day get together every Sunday for dinner with 35 people. Like that directly goes against the world they're trying to build. And I think they've been trying to kill it for a long time. And
they're doing a good job. That's the thing.
They are. We used to meet every Sunday, and now we meet one Sunday a month. And it's slowly, it's that death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's the only way to kill culture is flood it with other cultures and hope that it dilutes.
Well, look what they did with that ridiculous lockdown where they, you couldn't congregate, they were separating people in hospitals, and you couldn't have groups more than 6, and all this stuff that they conditioned people towards in this last operation, and then of course we're moving into a new operation now, and they're going to perpetuate that, especially now that censorship is higher than ever. The censorship here in America is as bad as being in China, and people don't even recognize it, which is so hilarious to me. And it's getting worse starting in a few days with the whole Google universe. And so bit by bit, it's going to come down to having to separate families, bit by bit, having to not only scrub the information digitally, but burn books. Bit by bit, books will be contraband, and natural medicines are under attack, and old ways are under attack. And it's become a full frontal situation in the round.
Did you see that story out of Canada today that they're removing books from libraries from before 2008?
I used to.
Because
that's hideous.
Because they don't adhere to today's societal norms.
Oh my God, that's hideous.
There's a secret disaster happening in Seattle. I used to service a building at a different job, and they would make paper, and they would take paper from anything and make wood pulp and all that stuff, and make it into recycled things. And I found one time 38 bins. Now we're talking pallets of library books from the county. This includes National Geographic, which, okay, sure. But this also includes Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, Reader's Digest, all the way back to the 40s. And so everything that may have been in the society, in the culture that you could find, was being shredded up and turned into recycled toilet paper, paper ass gasket covers, all of these things.
Oh dear.
No.
And they don't, why do you need a Reader's Digest? Why do you need a monthly periodical? Because if you want to dive back and really find out what the culture was like, you look up stupid things like that. Not the important novels of the day, not the the scientific papers of the day, things that reflect a culture as it was.
Yeah. This is what, and this is kind of what I do on my show with Prima Donnas of the Gutter, is the importance of pop culture is not just skin deep. It is a barometer for what's going on. And if you understand that, then you can see who's doing what, who's sponsoring what. You can go deeper from there. But it's like the mycelium, the fruit, the mushroom is just, it's like the leaves on a tree. They come and go. You got to understand what it's rooted to, and that's why it's significant. And of course, that's why they're going after all that.
Yeah. To bring it back to the destruction of a peoples, I've been wanting to say this. I keep coming across a video where the cameraman asks Irish people in Ireland, do you know what the most popular Irish baby boy's name is this year? And they all guess funny things. Sean, Patrick, Flannery.
Mohammed.
It's
Is it
Mohammed.
Mohammed? Yeah.
And when they find out it's Muhammad, they sort of laugh, and you can watch a part of their soul die as they politely say, wow, and do not say what's on their mind. They are all full of fear. As soon as they learn that, they understand. You watch people's brains click. Now, the Irish, specifically the Irish and Scottish, have been linked so tightly to the Basque people that aside from the Algonquin, if you're going to look one place for Basque culture in antiquity, you just look in Ireland, in Scotland. They're connected through the early expression of the Y chromosome, which you can find in Welsh people a bit, but it is the basis of the research that told the world that Basque DNA was different from everywhere else. They compared it against England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, predominantly.
There's also connections with the symbology of a curvilinear swastika. The Basques call it a lauburu, the four heads, and it's all over up north, up in that region too. Very, very almost identical curvilinear swastikas that is one of their main. It depicts the sun. It depicts a bunch of different things, but it's certainly prevalent throughout all of their symbology too.
Oh, yeah. It's all over. Well, in Scotland, which I am deeply connected to because of just the massive amount in my genealogy, I have been deeply offended that in the big house now, they were saying we've got a Muslim in there and the call to prayer and stuff. I can't tell you on it's like in my bones. It just is like they've sacked us, and this is not good. The most common name in Ireland should never be Mohammed. It should I mean, come on. And the slow trickle of this that's happened in the European world, I mean, look at in France, and I mean, I could go on about this. It gets me upset. Is so obvious. It's so in our face. And if we just strip out the modern context to it, and you just look at war planning, and you just look at the stories like watching the Vikings, right? If you just think of it like that, and you start to think about how one people's will take over another people's, we're watching that. Everything now, you know, all of the bloodlines now have been taken over by different. They've been stripped. Anne Boleyn's now black, you know, Merlin's now black. And I mean no disrespect here, but this is an erasing of European history. And just like they did with the Huguenots and the Basques and everyone else, they're coming for it all just straight. And there's been long legs to do this. And of course, you can see why they grew hatred for the Western world, because we have not been very friendly to their world with the warring and stuff. But who's winning right now? If you're looking at the scorecard, it's not Scotland, it's not Ireland. It's not Germany or
It's not the
Austria.
little guy.
Well,
It's a whole sacking, and it's just obvious. So for people to be surprised that in Ireland the number one name this year is Muhammad on the island of Ireland is ridiculous, because they should have been more in touch with it. And I just talked with Thomas Sheridan about this, that the latest generation and of Irish people were just, they finally were, everyone was doing well and no one paid attention, and now we have this problem. It's because I kept saying I'm hoping for the Fighting Irish to stand up against the sacking of them. You go to Ireland, you want the Irish experience. You want to experience Irish culture. I don't want to go to Ireland and experience Pakistani culture. I'll go to Pakistan. And so it's not a racist thing. And it should never be a racist thing to think you want to have your culture intact and moving forward. And that's another part of the fuckery that's gone on with all this. And this entrainment, brain entrainment with these agendas to get people on their knees and to shame them into submission. And I kept hoping for at least the Irish that have been so downtrodden over the years to stand up. And what Thomas said was so right on. With this modern generation of Irish have finally had it good, and they just didn't see it. And now so many of them are starting to see it, because it's changing the whole country there. It's changing the whole island. And it's just like it's doing in pockets here. I mean, it's why I left Minnesota.
I was just going to say, I'm seeing everything you're saying is resonating with me so well, because this area where I live for my whole life has been under the radar. And in the last 5 years, it has been, I mean, it's completely been invaded, and the people from before are gone. Like there's not it's Southern California here now. And it wasn't like that. And it happened fast, and it happened before anyone here knew it was coming. And now all the locals are priced out of even owning a home. It's outside money market, and the culture and like the people that were here living this way since the fucking 1800s now can't live that way because of an outside force came in and changed the whole dynamic of the situation.
And now you're soon to be a blue state.
And Idaho will never go blue.
I know, I'm kidding.
It might, if they keep pouring people in at the rate they're doing now. But people come here, and within a year or two, they turn real conservative.
But I think that's a different, same outcome, sort of. Not same outcome, but it's similar but different, because I think what the Irish situation is dealing with the immigration, the illegal immigration, and the government bending over to these people. It's happening all over Europe. It's not just Ireland.
And that plan
It's
is
happening
20 years
here
old.
too.
Yeah, here too. We've got millions of people pouring in, and who aren't even from South America.
The plan
they're
is
coming
20 years old.
Yeah,
The what?
yeah, that's what I'm
All
saying.
this time.
I know. It's the whole open
But-
borders thing. So
But
No,
here we are. That's the thing. Here we are. And so all these people that couldn't see it are finally starting to. And in a lot of these places, the tipping point's already been reached, because they infiltrated the smaller areas where they were able to take over small towns. It's not just London or New York or Paris. It's all the small towns now. And this is where it's insidious. And again, this is a big sacking. And if you look at it with a neutrality and look at it in a war room sense, it's obvious to see what's happening. And the operation looks to me like it was a success, because they outbreed us. And we are the enemy. Like we are the enemy, and they've made no bones about it. When you watch these videos, and they're saying we've taken Paris, we've taken London, and in Minneapolis, there are whole areas where I can't go. And this is happening in small town Tennessee. This is happening in Kentucky. This is happening all over the heartland, not just New York, not just California, not just Houston. And that's the thing. And at what point do people stand up and remember, we're not allowed to practice our own love of our own culture, whatever it is, unless it is approved, unless it's the approved culture. And so just like what's happened to the Basques through the centuries and the Huguenots and uh the
Welsh,
Gaelic speaking
the
and right
Cornish.
the Welsh and the Cornish, the Picts and the Sami, all this, just like what's happened, it's happening now on a globe, I don't want to say on a realm wide scale. And what are we doing? When they say mask up, we mask up. When they say you're locked down, you just stop going to see grandma because they tell you you can't see grandma now. People need to come to God fast. And I don't mean that in a religious way. I mean, just come to your senses and realize that this is only going to get worse. And just like we have genetic memory, those of us like Gary and Nathan for sure, in our genetic memory of this happening. I mean, this is something that came down through a cosmic inheritance of being persecuted like that. And here we are, we're in this time.
Did you see that story about that island off of Italy or south of Sicily today or Tuesday, I think it was?
Which one?
Cyprus?
Lampedusa.
Oh,
okay.
one of the smaller
Lampedusa.
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got a population of about 6,000 people, and in just 24 hours, they had 6,800 migrants take over the island.
Only
Yeah.
men?
Because
And that's what they're doing.
Yeah, it's because of the EU lax immigration policy. So now there's more migrants there than actual townspeople.
That's called sacking.
I'd like to see the logistics on how those migrants arrived there.
They came on boats. I saw videos of it, but it's all.
But was it organized?
It's all military-age men from the looks of it, from Africa.
Yeah, of course it is. That's called sacking. So if we were watching the Vikings series, that's called sacking. You know, people, maybe it will help people that can't see this shit to start fictionalizing it. And instead of watching the Vikings on TV, look at what's going on around their asses, because that's what's happening. And it ain't going to be good. There's no good ending unless you're the people sacking. And so what's left? And this, again, when we're talking about arch negative and more rare people with rare expressive qualities, it doesn't take a lot anyway.
Well, okay, so let's get historical behind the links. Every single civilization or peoples that we've mentioned have an older connection to early esoteric Christianity, we could call it, not necessarily a specific religion, even down to the Yazidi. Is that how you say it? But
Yazidi,
they actually have an older connection to the Bible than Europe does, and a lot of their reliquaries that they've had till very recently have reflected those older connections. Now, the funny thing is, in each of these countries, you can also find a Basque language, which is Ogam. And not only that, but I'm going to tie in 4 things at once. And if you know all 4, it'll make sense. Ogam inscriptions from Europe record Euskaric language, which is the Basque language. The monks in the area were descendants of Fan, the Athenians, and the Coptic Church is where they come from. The Yazid, damn it, what's the name again?
Yazidi.
The Yazidi also have good ties with the Coptic Church. And also the same, the people being persecuted over here with slow population replacement, Irish, Welsh, Scots, Basques, and Berbers, which we don't really
Yes.
What is a contemporary Berber? It was a man speaking to Aristotle in his time that said that the Greeks knew no old men, or there were no old men amongst the Greeks. And that came from the mouth of a Berber who remembered Egypt before Greece reached it. And so all of these old world connections are undergoing at least the biblical 430 years of slavery. And for Ireland, that is pretty specific. And all of these people are tied together. They're all doing the same thing. And the only one that's managed to avoid an outright war are the Basque people. But if we stop thinking of them as separate entities and think of them as disparate threads of a single thing, they begin to make more sense.
Absolutely. And I think like the links, why people sometimes do link Basques to Atlantis, it comes straight from Plato, and it's an interpretation of locations that Plato was talking about. So I forgot where I was going with that. My damn kids are going crazy.
We can't hear them, so don't worry about it.
Thank God, dude, because I'm about to snap. I think they know I'm serious now. So had to go regulate.
But basically, my point being, all of these people undergoing the slow replacement, this even happened in Africa as well, for about the past 430 years. So when you get into your Revelation end times are happening now, here's another correlate. But does it need to be against a single people, or perhaps the church of ideas? I had heard the word temple referred to as an ideology, not as a physical structure, the temple of the spirit. This referring to the idea or the doctrine of a specific faction or way of looking at things. And the idea of raising a third temple need not be a physical structure. And I thought that was an interesting idea, because we are seeing the destruction of, we could call it a second temple, the old world and its memories.
You think that we're now coming into that third phase of like an awakening, a new temple being built right now by those of us who can see what's going on?
A new temple of spirit? Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And the disparate threads of such persecuted peoples may yet hold on.
I think history tells us they will.
History also tells us that resolutions don't happen inside of a century, which I can't be happy about. We all want to think we're heroes, but we might actually be 4 generations earlier than the heroes, as a nameless footnote that helped keep the spark alive through the dark times.
Yeah, it's pretty dark right now, and it's only going to get worse.
I don't know. See, for my day to day, I think it's lighter than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I have more knowledge. It's only dark if you point your energy towards the darkness.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like my day-to-day life, I don't experience anything bad ever. It's like,
but as a whole on the planet, it's
just
pretty dark.
but if you just pay attention to what's happening to the world that people are caught up in, it's that shit's dark.
So you just don't pay attention.
But at the same time, if you're trying to do an open search, you are running against firewalls now,
right?
And you don't even realize it. That's your day to day. If you're online at all, then you're surrounded by what's going on, and you don't have to be looking and listening to podcasts or shows or alt anything. Just trying to do searches and looking at trying to find information on natural health and looking up historical stuff, as we were talking about earlier, then it's at your door. It's affecting you. If you are living completely off grid and off road, and you're not one of the areas that they've targeted with weather manipulation, then, yeah, your world can look the same, but I guarantee that, like a dark cloud, it's over you now, wherever you are. And that's the thing that's made this insidious. And this is the thing that is making it more uncanny, the uncanny feeling, because yeah, I get entranced by beautiful days outside where everything seems lovely and all this. But at the same time, then I go and I want to search some herb to heal whatever. And I get inundated with, that's misinformation. That's a danger, danger. And then you're flagged. And so this is not off in the distance. This is at everyone's door. And that's the thing here, is we're slowly normalizing this lockdown on us. And it's not just a spiritual lockdown. It's come down into the physical realm. And that's the thing we need to realize. So yeah, I'm still able to do a lot of stuff in my life that I was always able to do. Sure. Is everything getting more expensive? Yeah, it sure is. Is gas getting more expensive? Certain things are hard to find. Certain things you can't even buy now because they've been outlawed. Try to get natural old school light bulbs. I could go on for hours about this. We have trickled our way in a cut at a time, and we think it's still normal and natural, the world around us. But I guarantee you, if you start putting a microscope to the world you're living in now and go back 20 years, you're going to see how enclosed you've become.
I totally agree with that. I think there's an element of you're opting in, though, like you're taking by even going on the internet, you're using their systems. I mean, and not to say you could just go live in a van down by the river and be just happy till your heart's content, but you could also have a nice library at home to where you can look up that herb from a book. I mean, there are ways, and I'm optimistic on the Google front too, like we were talking about before the show. Dr. Robert Epstein, I think there's going to be some pushback on big tech here that's actually going to be impactful and significant coming down the pike. I think it's incredibly important to remain optimistic and to use the system against itself where we can. And if you can live part with 1 foot in the system and 1 foot out for now, it's going to be a lot easier if that system is suddenly thrust away from you or taken away from you, or if you're put into a position where you need to take an intervention in order to participate in that system. If you're already on your way out the door and aligning your thinking with systems that aren't as convenient, you're going to be a step ahead of 90% of the people out there.
Well, I'm a Luddite, and I can live out of my acre, and I've lived off-road and off-road and off grid and done midwifery and husbandry and all that. You don't even understand. And I see it. And I'm also not a nihilist, but I see it. And I'm not even off-centered here talking about it. What frustrates me is the fact that there are a lot of people living on the sunny side of the street. And again, the clouds are coming. And when you're looking at just the numbers of what's happening, and if you're looking around clearly, like you said, there's a shift in where you live. And so if you're on that little island off of Sicily, what's that say to your world? What do you say? What do you say? That's your island. That's your ancestral home. And now it's something else. And so I don't know how you can live on the sunny side of the street in those circumstances. And those circumstances are coming to all of us. My friends in Appalachia are absolutely overrun right now in areas where it's migrants, the migrants.
It's a nightmare spot right now.
Migrants from Haiti, migrants from Pakistan, migrants from South America, cartel members. These are old school haulers. And with Appalachians, whatever you want to call them, they're now outnumbered in many of these areas. And it's not just the rich that can afford to tear down the old school Appalachia because they want that view. It's this military situation that's happening. And yeah, good luck with the books. I'm a book person. I've got, I don't even know how many books, at least 1,000, and half of them are 1700s. I love books and I am an avid reader. But you know what? Half of the books that are now, we were just talking about it, they're banning them. They're going to come for those books like they've done before. If we look at history as a precedence for anything that we may be looking at as far as cycles and recognizing cycles, then we've got to come to terms with this. And I do agree with keeping a positive attitude. I do 100%. But what I'm seeing is too many people are in denial with their positive attitude because they're getting the homelessness is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. I just don't even know what to say about that. And when I was looking at these new homeless camps everywhere, because I'm out here between Portland and Seattle, I'm actually in an old logging town that had just a few thousand 10 years ago, and it's blown up. And I'm telling you, a good deal of these people are immigrants that are being placed in nice housing while all the old school poor families here have been taxed out and had to sell. It's a hard luck story here. And these other people are getting placed in because they're getting government grants from the local government. How is this the sunny side of the street? It's the sunny side of the street if you're these people they're placing and supporting for this overturn. And that's what I'm saying. I think that we need to actually kind of smell the coffee and wake up a bit, because inch by inch, bit by bit, it is happening. And keeping the good attitude is wonderful. And we've got to maintain a sense of stability, internal martial arts. But it's happening. I'm not so optimistic about anything digital at this point. I don't think that these lawsuits and all this are going to bring down the Google machine. It's BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard owns everything at this point, and they're buying up real estate. They own the pharmaceuticals. They're the ones telling you, you can't wear this, you can wear that. You have to stay this far away from that person. And it's going to continue. Why are we thinking that it's just all of a sudden going to be normal and there's going to be a counterbalance? Yeah, there is an undercurrent. And as an you're never an ex, but it's better to say this online, midwife, there was always an undercurrent. You became part of a network that nobody knows about because you're birthing babies into a world without putting them into the system with social security numbers. And we could tell each other by the herbs they're growing in their yard, especially in the Midwest. If you grew comfrey in your yard, you could guarantee back in the day that that was a midwife or that was somebody that was part of the network, like wearing a chimaruta in Sicily. I'm telling you, this shit is coming. This shit is not coming. It's here. And I'm seeing it as an outsider. And I am actually concerned. I'm not concerned about myself because I chose not to have kids. But this is happening. And I don't see how living on the sunny side of the street is going to make anything better here. And I'm sorry to rant.
Hey,
No, it makes my life better. So that's why I do it. But yeah. And I don't disagree with anything that you said.
No, me neither.
I just don't think there's any harm in having a positive attitude about life at all.
I agree with that.
I completely compartmentalize my positivity because most of the time I do feel up in arms and I'm always looking for a solution to what I see as the great problem. Well, my one rule in my whole life is don't tell me what to do. Yeah. That sounds like a childish thing, but
I'm exact same way.
Try to take that simple thing. Don't tell me what to do. Can you apply that successfully to anything in your life? Most people, the answer is no. And so when Gary and I started talking about real world things, IRL, we have physical future plans because I found a like-minded individual.
I answer to no one but myself.
Yes, and that's the goal. Now, as a society, what was so interesting about the whole Basque thing is who the fuck decided to leave them alone? And how do I get some of that?
I think they're just master negotiators. No one left them alone. They tried. The Basques just negotiated their way out of it every time somehow.
Whoa. Rome tried real hard everywhere else and succeeded everywhere else and never once took a flame to a Basque village.
Oh, that's not true. They tried. They sent Charlemagne up, and the
Oh
Basques
my
sent
God,
him
you're right.
back down, battered and bruised. They sent Leonidas up, and the Basques sent him back down. And they tried. The Basques negotiated with the Romans by letting them mine all their precious metals, and the Basques made all the Roman money. The Basques were the Roman sellswords. So they compromised and negotiated their way out of complete, slavery, essentially, or destruction of culture.
That's the only bootstrap story that I could believe.
Nathan, I'm with you on this. This is an internal sense of self, of presence within self. And, some people want to call that sovereignty, personal sovereignty, which it is. This is that little light of mine. I'm going to let it shine kind of thing. And it also ties into your biofield, and it ties into your unseen bodies that are part of your body, but people don't value that stuff anymore. And so by keeping a center line and by understanding that principle, those of us with that whatever that is, some people call it the rebel yell, whatever you want to call it, we get that. I get that. And I've had that since I was born out of this blood. And so that's in me. It is genetically in me, and I feel it, and I ain't going down to any of this bullshit. But at the same time, I recognize it and I see it. And that's what I was saying, just through genetics. I recognize this pattern, and that's the thing. And it's frustrating to see so many people bending the knee. And I'm getting that to that point by looking at everyone that capitulated with the fuckery that was the last 4 years of the lockdown and the masking and the separation of friends and family. And then
they weren't alive when we interred the Japanese in our own soil. They weren't alive when the newspapers told America that the Germans were cutting off the right arms of little boys so they'd never hold a rifle in opposition to them. They weren't alive for any of that. And according to you and Jerry, they're not even real people.
I do not think that.
They're
real people. I just think they're not enabled.
They don't have souls.
No, I never said that either.
I think there's a deeper
NPC idea.
That's not soulless. That's just an offline soul, if you will. I don't think there are. If souls are real, I think everyone has one.
Nish, I love the way you articulated the situation we find ourselves in today's world. I think you just absolutely hit the nail on the head with your little rant that you went on, and I think that was awesome. However, I do think it is super important, while we can recognize that all that's happening, to maintain, a bit of optimism and not let the oppressive nature of everything we see, from the chemtrails to the population to the prices to the gas. Like, you gotta, I in my life, I try to get above it, and I'm sure you guys do too. And otherwise, like, it's just black pill all the time, and that I don't think that's any way to go, is like full black pill. Although I recognize the reality of the situation, it's important to pick out spots where we can have optimism.
I agree with you. You got to do what you can. And see, this is the thing that I think a lot of people get caught up in, is they think that the doing is they've got to go and stand up at this organization or stand up at that rally or whatever. The doing part of this is actually being an observation and seeing what's happening. If you just recognize what's happening, that's a big deal. And that's a lot of it. You don't, I mean, this becomes, I think it's going to be a personal thing for everyone. This is an individual situation where what you can resist, what can you bear, and what will you resist? And it needs to be recognized as an individual thing. And I don't think there's one prescription for how you move through these times. And so I'm not a depressive person at all. In fact, I can't quite remember the last time I felt depressed. Maybe when my mamo died a few decades ago. It murdered, by the way, but I'm not depressed, and I'm not nihilistic, actually. And people, I think, that are in the Cosmic Salon audience would know that I'm always trying to bring solutions. But at the same time, I'm frustrated with the amount of people that are somehow not seeing the bigger picture. That frustrates me. It frustrates me because, like, Bill Gates throwing mosquitoes, GMO mosquitoes in California that migrate up here, or the GMO ticks, that's going to affect me. My neighbor spraying Roundup in his yard is going to affect me. You know, it's the unseen stuff. The chemtrails are going to affect me, and I don't get a say in that. That's the stuff. It's like, really?
Yeah.
So this major stuff that is big and changing us as a species and changing our world, that is passively affecting us individually, it's affecting our children. Our children are growing up in some sort of new, weird, confangled chemical cocktail of fuckery, and it's changing them genetically, and it's passive. It's a passive thing. So I feel worried about the next generation and the next generation, because I'm seeing the degradation right now in the generations. I'm seeing it.
I think it's undeniable. It's everywhere. And I think if more people could hear it articulated in this way, more people would understand.
And for anyone who's listening who thinks that the idea is pessimism versus positivity, this is the arguments for both sides of this here. Even though you guys largely agree, you're lawful good and chaotic good and neutral good having a conversation. If you really want to see pessimism and the true depths, which I argue that most pseudo-intellectual spectators in the world, the views that they hold, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race by Thomas Ligotti perfectly illustrates the poison at the heart of modern day nihilism. And that is far from what we argue. The idea is how to reach a solution, how to better our lives, not the true pessimism that has taken root in most of the first world.
And, you know, that's the thing too. I need to check that book out if I can.
It is insane.
If it's still available. That's
it's on Audible. That's on Audible.
I'm just saying, I was making a joke.
Oh.
But if
I wanted to throw something in real quick before you go on. We're talking about burning books and getting rid of culture and whatnot. The move to digital gives whomever the ability to censor and change literature from the past. They've already been doing it. What was it they just changed? Shit, I can't remember. But some famous book, they just changed or were about to change.
They do it non-digital too. Go try to get a copy of John Coleman's book unedited, or you know, Cooper's book unedited. I mean, they do it on paper too now.
I do. That's right, Gary. Do realize that. But I'm just saying though that when everything's digital, eventually they'll stop publishing books. When everything's digital, there's that connection to the past will be gone, because everything will be constantly updated to keep up with what they consider cultural norms, which are basically social engineering.
Yes, Andreas and I were talking about this a couple years ago. Yeah. Do you know how cheap it is to buy a pamphlet press to print small paper books?
Probably under $1,000.
$200-300 for a really cheap one. But we talked about this the first time I came on. I mentioned the Hati Trust, all of the universities
Yes,
getting
yes.
together. And if you cannot check out a physical book, um, if you are a student, you're allowed to check out a digital book. Now, this may be changed. It may not be the original physical. They're going to deny access to the physical books, call them relics, say you can't touch them, and you can have the edited copy online. But while one person has checked out the digital copy, no one else may check it out. It's international at this point, and it's a bane on libraries.
Is that archive.org or whatever it is?
The Hati Trust,
Okay.
Hathi. TrueStream Media talked about it. So did Corbett.
There are a couple of services like that that have that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. The Hati Trust is the first one doing it on like city and state libraries as well as universities. And the universitariat, wherever you go, if you go to Yale, they're going to have different books than you're going to find at Princeton, and each will be unique collections, now untouchable. The barrier to information grows ever stronger.
I've been doing I've been pulling out some of my very old books and doing some experiments with searching. This is why I've been on the search engine crazy right now, and typing in, besides the fact that you used to be able to type into search engines and have like endless numbers of pages, now it's like 5 and you bottom out. But just today, even something I posted on my very neglected Instagram, the only social media I have that's on lockdown, I was looking through an antique vellum copy of let's see, what is this one? Of the Imitation of Christ. So not a modern version of it. This is an old one, and it's a vellum copy. It's got plates in it that they don't have in the newer versions. I tried to type in this plate, and I couldn't find images of King Herod's wife, and when she visits him afterwards, after she's been murdered by him. And I couldn't find an image, that same image, anywhere. I couldn't find it anywhere. I was searching everywhere because I wanted to see if I could find it. And so I posted it on Instagram. I didn't say that because I don't want to alert it. And here I am saying here, but I've been testing to see if I can find these things, and I can't find half of them that I'm looking at through the old books. Now, I'm sure if it's a new version of this book, I don't know. I only have this old vellum copy that's a couple 100 years old, and it's even typing in some of the text that it's quoting from. I can't find this stuff online. I can't find it. And so this is, and I'm fortunate because I'm a book person. I've always valued books, and I've collected them my whole life. And so I'm fortunate to have a library, but this is ridiculous. Looking for a traditional Chinese medicine today, I can't find this medicine anywhere. I can't find it. And it is not an uncommon medicine. Now, I know if I go down to a Chinatown and I, like in LA or New York or, the bigger Chinatowns, San Francisco, which was always my favorite Chinatown, I would be able to go into one of those pharmacies and be able to get it off the shelf. I know that, but you can't get it online. And it's a particular medicine that protects you against hemorrhagic fever. It's very specific, and TCM has a cure for it, and you can't find it online. You can barely find even a reference of it. So, and it's these little examples that let you know that we are heavily censored. It's to that degree now, and I don't think people realize that it's come down to that. And where do we go from here? I mean, this is crazy. And what about people that don't have libraries, personal libraries, or their books aren't very old? They're talking about cars. You have to have a car that's, what is it, Jer? Is it like I heard it's like 2010 or earlier when they don't have the board in them because it's is it 2010, Jared? There's
Which
like
board?
a digital board in them. I think it was 2010 or
I thought it was 97.
it might be, you might be right. It's something. These cars are like the safe cars. And what are they outlawing? I mean, they're slowly telling us we're not going to be able to run our cars anyway. The 15-minute cities Agenda 2030, that's happening. That's happening.
Look at
It's
London.
happening in my town. It's happening in your town. It's
No,
written.
not happening here.
It is happening in the underwriting. I looked at the Florida codes. Go to Deborah Tavares's page and she has it all specifically out. It's happening. It's underwritten in all your towns, even in Texas, even in Florida. It's being underwritten. And so you have to know what language you're looking for. And that's why it's so tricky, because it is being sneakily done bit by bit. And at what point? I mean, they've told us because of climate change, there's going to be no more gas cars in just a few years. Everyone's like, well, that's 20, that's 10 years away. Well, now it's 7 years away and it's going to be 5 years away. And so in Washington State, where I live, our governor's trying to flag this stuff, and they're going to tax you per mile. They're going to do it. They're telling you they're going to do it. And then you can't have it. Just like the windows in your house, you're going to have the coded windows, the coded everything in your house. And it's all a fire hazard. It's all easily blown up, as we see with the attacks everywhere. And like my house, which is an antique house, and I will not capitulate. I like a house that breathes. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I don't care how cold it is outside. And they're going to come for your windows, and they're going to come. They're already done the smart metering thing, and you can fight and fight and fight. They still get what they want. They still bully you into it one way or another. And it's happening. That's what I'm saying. And they're burning people off of the grid that are off grid and on the outlying areas. They're flooding them out. They're calling eminent domain left and right. I know so many people that are dealing with this right now. It's not like it's some strange people somewhere else. It's people around us.
No, it's me. I mean, I was trying to buy a house right when COVID hit, and prices tripled, interest rates doubled. I mean, look, be a small family trying to buy a house, be a small family trying to survive right now. And we're in one of the so-called, best places to be. It's undeniable, Nish. You're 100% right on with everything you're saying.
I'm in the same boat as Gravy. There's, remember when China decided to start rounding up rural families, forcing them into the cities?
Yes.
That's it.
How's that different?
It's a coming.
It's a coming.
Yeah, but who wants to live in the cities these days? They're hellholes.
Nobody does. The point is, in China, they did that forcibly. Now we're a few years behind everything. We have some great circumstances that'll waylay a lot of the early efforts. That's why I'm so keen on getting with Gravy or Gary. I said Gravy. But Gary and Shellback.
Read and chat.
We got good things going on. Like, there's still places like New Hampshire. There's no eminent domain law. That Free State Project has done some really good stuff. Shellback was showing me stuff today. They've quietly infiltrated that state government with no party affiliation and taken over. I mean, what we need, I think, what we could really use is more people, not participating in the two-party paradigm and just doing what's best.
Yes,
and taking that attitude to where you can get into a position of power or authority and using it with responsibility.
See, this is I hold out, and I'm constantly saying this. I hold out hope for this. Resist, and figure this way out. I do think that there's as a person who's been in underground networks her whole life, born into it. I hold out hope for this. There's always that, and I'm holding out hope for it. And I haven't lost hope, but there's, it's like that something happened in New Mexico recently that I never thought would happen. I lived in New Mexico in the Ortiz Mountains, off-road and off-grid. I'll tell you what, there's cowboys there and they open carry. I'd never been in another state that you walk into places and you got the old West cowboys with like their guns and their holsters right out, and cowgirls and all this. It was always very proud open carry. New Mexicans, if you don't understand New Mexicans, they're their own people. It's a specific group, and the native New Mexicans, which is a mix of a bunch of different cultures. And this is why New Mexico is so exciting. And what did they do? What are they doing right now in New Mexico? That's the one state over Texas, over any other, that I thought would never have that happen. And now they're making concealed carry and all this. I mean, they just double whammied them there. And that's what gives me pause, because the Samson here, or not the Samson, the Goliath here is so big and monstrous. It's just reaching. This is another thing that makes me think about Revelation is there's a desperation with this grab. There does seem to be a desperation, like there's a timing here. And I think if we can all activate our systems, our biofield, our let that internal light shine, I do believe we can win this. And I do believe we can outdo this. And we've seen this story a million times where it takes like 2% of the people to take care of all of the tyranny and stuff. So I'm a believer in that, but it's just, I think we need to recognize how deep in this we are right now and quit kicking the can 20 years into the future, because that's the thing. We need to recognize it now.
And Niche, there may be a Goliath, but what people get wrong about that story is, well, David was a trained soldier, so convincing that he managed to convince his king to take this fool on one-on-one. And he said, how are you going to beat him? And he said, I'm going to hit him in the head with a stone. That confidence. So when they're trying to take away the guns in New Mexico, I don't know if those cowboys are going to lay in their own graves. So I mean, I have confidence.
So as far as
Nathan, I'm with you on that. I totally am. It's not going to be easy.
No, it's not going to be. Just update on that whole situation. I forget which court it was exactly, injuncted that today for 14 days until the trial. So it's off. That's not going to happen. It was I found that whole situation interesting because on one hand, you've got the left coming out saying, hey, this is too far. Like Ted Lieu, David Hogg, those type of people. On the right, you've got the AG, the sheriff, basically the usual people, the people in the gubernatorial structure itself saying, hey, this is a step too far. Where were these people during the last 3 years when our rights were being trampled on left and right by the government? Who stood by and allowed that to happen? But this comes up and they're like, oh no, that's too much. It seems very orchestrated to me.
This is part of the manufactured message that this is an event towards a means to an end,
I think, and this is not an original idea, I said this last night, I really think that the intent here is to push the Overton window so far to the left that the gun controllers can come out and say, hey, well, how about we just, ban large capacity magazines and semi-automatic rifles? And,
it's not an attempt. It is. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I really think I think that's what's going on. So
just the fact that the main percentage, the conversation is around that, it has shifted that window.
Yes.
A quick segue here. All of the people in the world, and this is an argument that I champion regularly, all of the people in the world that talk about fighting the system, that talk about holistic medicine, that talk about being a Luddite or going back to their roots. Have you ever learned traditional archery? Can you throw a
Yes.
sling?
Yes.
These are things that, even with a compound bow or a crossbow, these are things that matter. Yeah, the gun debate is huge. Um, the idea that we might not be able to fire a piece of metal really fast is a hot topic in America, but you can hear a gunshot for 3 miles in the right conditions, and you can hear an arrow for 20 feet.
At best.
If you want to be fit and you want to be, as Modwiz would say, feral, learn the old ways. When
That
nothing
ties it back
works,
to the Basques. Exactly.
yes,
Like
when
study
nothing
the
works,
Basques, study the indigenous cultures of wherever you're from. Exactly. And you're going to have a step ahead. That's they're trying to kill those ways right now. It's happening. We're
yes.
in the middle of it. And so somebody's got to carry the torch.
And the bow, and stop using your fucking gym membership and go learn to draw a bow. Just please.
Well,
I'm
now
sorry.
we've got the new, sounds like my house over there with the dogs. Now, you know, we are also working against electronic warfare. And
Yeah.
this goes back to Atlantis, because I believe that that was an advanced civilization that did have the stuff that we're coming into. I don't know the P's and the Q's of this, but I do believe this is part of like this whole causality looping that I really do pull up to. I really do. It's easy to see the small patterns. And if we're looking at the small patterns, then you've got math and you can project further. It's like drawing out the tree of life or a fractal. There is something in patterning. And when we're looking at high technology, what are the last civilizations we know of, at least through the stories? I mean, there wasn't a lot about Atlantis that Plato gave us, but it was a high civilization with high tech. And then the whole Tartaria thing, I think we talked about at some point with Nathan at one point. But seriously, when you look at these old buildings, the old basilicas, the old stuff in India, all the masterful artwork and paintings, where are those kinds of craftsmen now? Because they don't exist. And as an artist, I'm going to tell you, I don't know. I don't know any sculptors. I didn't even find any classes that could teach me the kind of stuff that I can go out and look at in monumental, gorgeous buildings in periods of time when we're in a horse and buggy and we have a chisel. And I mean, these stories are ridiculous. And so we have to question this. And again, this is why book burnings, this is why keeping the information up to date and current, and making sure narrative is sewn in and entrained into the modern new generations. And so the old ways, like we're talking about here with Gary and Nathan, that the oral traditions like natives people have done always are important. This is how we remember, and remembering is part of the story here. And there, ironically, are a lot of people, when you ask them, they don't want to remember. So when you bring up that whole idea of, would you want to remember all your lives? A lot of people say no. And even if you give a caveat of, so without emotional attachment, would you want to know your footprint through the illusion of the clockwork of time? And it's amazing to me how many people don't want to know for whatever reason. And so it is the native peoples, the Basque, the Sami, you know, we could go on, the Aboriginals in Australia and New Zealand and Papua New Guinea, everywhere, the native peoples that live close to close networks that have stories. And they pass the stories down.
Well,
somewhere we're going to have to capture that, Gary.
I say just
prepare
for Mad Max world, basically.
We're so right there with you this whole time, Nish. Like you're articulating it all so well. I really like.
This
I
is
just
Nathan.
appreciate this
Isn't this how we
conversation.
stand? Isn't this how we resist? Isn't this how we move forward? This is what gives me hope, is that we do retain this, and we know that we retain it in our genetics. We know that each of us is a walking receptacle of a great inheritance. And then when you start looking and parsing out stories like the Basque, which this is phenomenal when we start thinking about where they took stands and why they were left alone and all this gives me hope. And that's the hope I have. I'm actually getting the goosebumps thinking about this. So I do have hope. I have hope in all that. I have hope in the natural. That's where I have hope.
The idea that we want out of something that we can't function without is I think a fool's errand. I think that we need to learn to function without. And the separation of the family and the dissolution of these select societies stops tradition, stops gathering, stops the sharing of trades, the sharing of oral histories. All of these things are broken to sever you from anything except reliance on a system that is hell-bent on your constant need for treatment. This is why we need, and I bring up the point with guns, but it's for everything.
Yes.
You have to rely on guns, but be a weapon. You have to rely on medicine, but learn what leaf to eat. You need to rely on a sewage and water infrastructure when you could just learn how deep to dig the hole you shit in and how to run your water through dirt and rocks until you can drink it. I mean, those are overly simplistic examples, but saying what we're dissatisfied with without walking outside and learning to interact with the world, you've only got a piece of the puzzle. And I'd love to talk more about how to find the rest with anybody who wants to.
These are the conversations that we need to be having right now. We need to be relating the old ways to the new ways and how that applies to right now, and how we can, like you said, find that place to take a stand that happened in history, that you stand on a principle that benefits future generations. You know, what the cliche of planting the tree that you'll never see the shade from.
Yes. Oh, I love that analogy so much. Like that has inspired me my whole life. And you see it in certain cultures really well, like the Japanese, where they are thinking that far ahead, and they'll plant a ginkgo knowing that it takes 200 years to be big. That is a magical way of living and thinking. The whole wabi-sabi thing is a magical way of thinking. And these conversations right here, right now, tonight, these are now dangerous conversations. And that's what's scary.
To whom?
Well, not to us, and probably not to the majority of the audience, except for the alphabet trolls that are probably just lurking and being quiet. But
hi guys.
Yeah, hello. And so, but this is the thing, and it is important. This is so important that we remain conscious during this. I think that's part of the thing here that gets us through, that we continue to stay lucid in this dream, that we continue to engage with it, not disengage with it, because the whole system is telling us to disengage. And there is where we should be concerned. And we're engaging tonight. We're talking in a way that is now dangerous, because first of all, we have opinions. Hello, our own opinions.
And we refuse.
And they're not popular.
And our pronouns are unknown.
Right. So, I mean, this has just been such a pleasure. And, Nathan, every time you're on, I get so inspired. I think I've been, every time you get on, I get fired up like this. There's something in your nature.
My nipples get hard when he's on.
I've listened to the other episodes, and you let your hair down when I come out.
I do. It's something with you. I mean, I'm usually calm and collected, but
Because he's fucking handsome. That's why they both are.
Why do you think I'm trying to get him out to my neck of the woods?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But this has been such a pleasure. And Gary, we've got to have you back and dive deeper into the Basque. I apologize for I got really impassioned
That was
tonight.
amazing.
it's all good.
No, it was nothing to apologize for. This is something I'm constantly working on. I would love to come back and talk more about anytime. Like, this has been one of the best conversations I've had in a while. So I just appreciate you guys letting me be a part of it.
It made me.
You'd love her.
It made me think we need to do or should do a series of shows regarding solutions for the future.
That's a great
where we
idea.
can focus on specific topics for a couple hours, like barter systems and hunting or whatever old ways we choose to dig into and
You
bring
son
on.
of a bitch, I'm in.
Yeah, I think that would be cool.
I totally agree. I would love it.
Well, cool. Well, thank you guys. This was great. Thank you everyone for listening. We will be back in 2 weeks with Josh Kutchin. He's got a new book coming out, a novel actually. So we're going to talk about that. Should be interesting. Maybe we could talk him into giving us a reading.
Josh is a good guy.
I love Josh.
You know him personally, Jared.
I do. He's an amazing human being. All my friends are. You guys are.
The stories that guy can tell.
I know. Oh, you should I hung out with him for a whole weekend once. Oh my God, it was so awesome.
That's cool, man.
He just has like this vast array of useless Bigfoot lore. And
It's so fun. I think we need that. We need that escape too. Like, not, we need a little bit that's not politics and black pill. Like, we need a little mystery in our lives.
We need the magic, and that's
Absolutely.
that is some magic. It's beautiful.
Well, cool. Anyway,
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.